Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, John.
So, more midterm news that doesn't sound good for Republicans in Florida. A special election saw the unexpected victory of in a Florida House district, Emily Gregory, Democrat in the Mar-a-Lago district, upsets Trump-backed GOP candidate John Maples. Okay, I'm bringing this up not to have a conversation about how the midterms are shaping up badly for Republicans, but because of a specific thing relating to Emily Gregory that brings up a very interesting piece that was published last week in the Bulwark by Lauren Egan. And Lauren Egan proposes that what Democrats really need to do is nominate good-looking people for House and Senate seats, because all available evidence suggests that people like to vote for hot people. And she adduces evidence, she quotes people, she talks about things that are said on podcasts and all of that. And it's an amusing piece, and there's a lot to it, because of course, in one sense, when we say, someone's hot, what we mean is they're alluring, they have charisma, they catch the eye, you remember them because of what they look like, which is a great plus in politics, where people are coming at you that you know nothing about. But I have a slightly different take on this, which she doesn't really get into, which is that the Democratic Party's major problem, it seems to me, is that it is increasingly looking like a freak show. It supports freakish policy issues, kind of elevates weirdness, social weirdness, things that are not sort of conventional or traditional, or sort of like in the mainstream of the way Americans live their lives. And that one visual way that you can counteract that problem is by having good-looking people as the front, who are standing in front, like the Wizard of Oz. The people behind the curtain are the trans people, and Sergeant Rachel Levine and this one and that. But the people that you're seeing out in front are all kind of like sorority presidents and the football players and that sort of thing. So what do you think of this theory, Eliana?
On the margins, of course, it helps to be attractive, but Kamala Harris is, relatively attractive woman, and nonetheless, effective messaging about the policies that she really stood for brought her down. So I think, sure, it's helpful, but it's kind of silly. Of course, everybody would choose. Given the choice, everybody's going to choose the attractive candidate, and everyone knows having Rachel Levine be your candidate is the death knell of a candidacy. So I guess I'm a little bit confused about what it is the choice we're making.
Okay, but I think by bringing up Kamala, you're missing the point, because now I'm going to be ageist. Like, Kamala's too old to be hot. I mean, she's an incredibly attractive person, being 60 years old, but she's 60 years old. So we're talking here about people in their 30s or in their 20s or something like that, who are manifestly alluring, and maybe somebody you can project, I hate to put it this way, sexual fantasies onto, that you wouldn't necessarily for a really attractive person in their 50s or 60s.
Okay,
despite the fact that I, as a person in my 60s, I understand people are making a sexual object out of me, and you go right ahead, but I don't think I really fit this category.
We could talk about Gavin Newsom, and I think on the whole, his
also 58. 58 years old,
But
too old.
for men,
But,
I don't agree with that. I don't think for men age is as much of an issue as it is for women. We could
oh, well,
talk about
thank you.
Sarah Palin, where I think her looks were helpful, but again, not a panacea for her other issues. And we could talk about this House candidate in Tennessee, whose name I'm blanking on now, who was attractive, but again, was just too left wing for the district. I actually think that the best candidates are somewhat more relatable. They're George W. Bush or they're Bill Clinton, where they're somewhat good looking, but they're not so good looking that they're not unrelatable to people.
Abe, where are you on this looksism?
Well, I
And
Looksism helps Democrats.
charisma is more important than
Right.
looks,
Okay.
which is Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. Barack Obama's very good looking.
Yeah. Yeah. But he was young. I mean, he was 42 years old when he ran for president. That's young by any
And by the way,
standards.
Trump,
Yeah.
you know, good looking, but he more has the charisma of a college football coach than a Hollywood star. So
Right.
I think my
Right.
theory holds.
Okay.
I think there's something interesting about the idea that Democrats would benefit from not just good-looking candidates, because, as Eliana says, that's always it's always going to give you a couple of points, but presentable looking, normal looking, as a way of tempering the kind of tendencies that are associated with their party. It also makes me wonder if the obverse isn't a little true for Republicans. Sort of part of breaking the mold of republicanism, of the Republican Party over the last 10 years, has been about this sort of like getting rid of the stodginess, and there have been some wild Republicans over the past few years. Some of them quite attractive, and I think in some sense it's kind of the mirror image dynamic at work there.
So, I think this has been a 6-decade issue for Democrats. In other words, Republicans, even though Democrats have always been the larger party, at least until relatively recently, like remember in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, Americans claimed to be Democrats over Republicans by a factor of 2. But Democrats had to battle the idea that they were not like everybody else. They were not like the mainstream of America. So that when Eugene McCarthy ran for president in 1968 as this kind of slightly outsider insurgent, and he was trying to harness the world of the emerging counterculture, one of the things that was told to the people who wanted to help McCarthy win was that they should go clean for Gene, meaning they should shave their beards off and wear a button-down shirt and maybe a tie. Like a clean for Gene person would look like what Steve Kornacki looks like now. That was the idea. Make yourself be presentable and like a person that a 40 or 50-year-old voter wouldn't go, I can't vote for that guy McCarthy. He's got these freak show hippies who are his supporters. And on through the 80s and 90s and onward. Take 2006. In 2006, when Rahm Emanuel was running the National Congressional Campaign, or whatever the Democratic version, was running the House races for the Democrats.
And the DSCC, or D...
whatever. It's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, or DCCC, or something like that.
Yeah.
His goal was to get veterans and people who, veterans really, but I mean people who looked like they were ordinary, normal, patriotic Americans, not anti-war protesters, not people who've been out in the streets, screaming in 2003 about how we were committing an illegal war. He wanted a front, a united front that was, we Democrats are just as patriotic as Republicans. Look how many of us have served with distinction in the military, and George Bush and the Republicans are screwing this all up. They screwed up Iraq. They screwed up the response to Hurricane Katrina. And we have this crew of competent, good-looking American heroes. So every time Democrats need some kind of a boost, and their main issue is that they are obsessed with an issue set that can make the ordinary workaday voter go, what the hell are you talking about? I don't want boys in my daughter's bathrooms. They can bring somebody up who will, even they'll say whatever they'll say, look like they would agree with you that you don't want boys in girls' bathrooms. So that even in a case like in Texas, like with this candidate, James Tallarico, the point about Tallarico is that Republicans are now trying to desperately uncover evidence that while he looks like he's a nice Christian, Texan, good person, all of that, that in fact he has freak show views, and that all of that is a cover, and that they're trying to puncture it. So this has been like a real issue for Democrats going on 3 generations. The issue with Republicans, as Abe brings up, is that the freak show aspect of Republicanism has become really much more pronounced in the last 10 years, and the personages of these very controversial weirdos who actually get elected to office and then come to Washington and have no idea what they're doing or what they want to do legislatively, but know how to make a scene.
They're also more pronounced because of the contrast they create with what the right was before them.
Right.
One would expect something freak show adjacent, perhaps, to emerge from somewhere on the left. The fact that they've come at all from the right is the startling fact, I think.
Right. I mean, let's just take as a visual matter the distinction between, let's just say, AOC and Rashida Tlaib. Their politics are indistinguishable. Their radicalism is indistinguishable. Their anti-Semitism is indistinguishable. Their vile hatred of America is indistinguishable. But Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, to some extent, walk around. They're wearing hijab in public. They are making it clear that they believe themselves to be separate, a separate population in some sense, or representing a separate population. And AOC looks like a hot 32-year-old woman on a Netflix show about hot 32-year-old women looking for love in LA or New York or something like that. Does that make her relatable? It certainly makes her more relatable than when Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are screaming at Trump on the floor during the State of the Union.
I don't find this to be like a deep insight, though, that the very attractive AOC is going to be more palatable to Americans than the, hijab wearing Muslim Congresswoman. Of course she will be. The thing is, and this is also, I think, accounts for some of Mamdani's success, is that he's handsome and he's young.
He always wears a suit.
Yeah. And if you recall, Hillary Clinton, when she was running against Obama, you remember her trying to circulate those pictures of him wearing like Muslim garb, whatever was foreign garb. Yeah. Of course, I just don't see this actually as being an endemic problem for Democratic politicians. Like most of them, aside from the ones we've mentioned, do look basically normal. It's actually the aides who are a bunch of freaks. And it's their young aides who are out protesting and looking like complete weirdos. And on the whole, on both the left and right, I haven't read the piece, so there may be nuances that I'm missing. I'm not I have to say, I'm not an avid Bulwark reader.
It's not a particularly nuanced point. It's just like nominate hot chicks and like himbos and bimbos, and you'll
And
do better. In other words, like all things being equal, if you had a
maybe,
himbo or a bimbo, you'll do better.
maybe, but
Okay,
but
that's
I
her
don't
point.
think, in a Tallarico versus John Cornyn matchup where you have, I guess, like an okay, handsome-ish young guy versus John Cornyn. Like, I don't think it at all is going to be a challenge to prove
Right.
to Texas voters that Tallarico has views that are way far out of the mainstream, not just in Texas, but anywhere in this country.
Okay, look, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not committed to this theory. I just wanted to start the show without talking about Iran. So this just sort of floated in my
That I
head.
wholeheartedly support.
Okay, so I just thought maybe we might want to start, on a sort of lighter note, because I guess we are going to have to talk about Iran and the war now, because after all, that is the only thing that really matters. And I think it's fair to say that we can raise the various possibilities of what is going on at this moment, and that we have no idea. We have no clue. So I'll just I'll raise a couple of possibilities, and then we can respond to them with the understanding that what is going on in Trump's head remains a complete mystery, and that the thing about a guy who is continually surprising is that he's continually surprising, and then you think, okay, I've learned he's continually surprising, but now he won't be. But that's all he is. He's got tricks. He pulls out tricks after tricks beyond tricks. It's like he's like a magician who knows every magic trick that's ever been pulled, and it's like, okay, you haven't seen this one? Let me show you this card trick. So he just surprises you every day. And then everyone's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe he's done this. And it's like, stop being so surprised. But even I feel that way. So possibility number one, the 15-point plan presented to the Iranians, apparently in Pakistan, supposedly, which features them agreeing to never have a nuclear program and to degrade their uranium and give it to the IAEA, and to they can develop some missile capability for defense but nothing else, and to leave the Straits of Hormuz open and all that. And if they do these 12 or 13 things, then sanctions and stuff will be lifted against them. That this 13 point is either Trump trying to get himself out of a box that he's in, or it's a delaying tactic because he's getting the expeditionary force and more Marines and the 82nd Airborne, and everyone's got to show up by Friday or Saturday, and he's got to talk about something for a week while they don't have much to do, and he wants to talk down oil prices while this is going on. So the possibilities are he's negotiating with himself to get himself out of the war, or it's all a ruse. Okay.
I think there's another possibility.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, which is that he wants to publicly show Iran being unreasonable, so that he can continue.
I agree with that.
War with maximum strength. I think so.
Does that mean it's a ruse? So that's is it a ruse, or is it like if they were to agree,
it's somewhere in between. I mean,
fine.
it's just somewhere in between. I don't think he expects, despite what he says, I don't think he expects Iran to make an actual deal that they would stick to that would be satisfactory to the U.S. I think, this started with Trump. The administration figured, okay, let's have Israel take a few shots at Iran's energy sector. Then we'll say we called it off, but that we reserve the right to unleash the dogs again if Iran doesn't cooperate. Let's see how much. Let's see if that gets them to a point of even talking, so that we can have this moment where they are completely unreasonable, and then we can bring in the the paratroopers and whatever else, and take this all the way.
Or he can say, we really wanted to sit down and talk, or we did sit down and talk, and their demands for a ceasefire include the closure of all our bases in the Gulf. They want us to pay them. That will be a big thing for him. They want reparations for all of this. They want us to pay them to transit the Strait of Hormuz, and they want to keep their missiles. And he can say, like, we just can't agree to this. There's no way we can agree to any of this. We've got to keep going.
So let me ask you this, since you two are in agreement about this, does this present an opportunity that people are complaining, if Christine were on, she would help us with this, right? Because this is like her great bugbear, which is that he's not explained the purpose of the war and the goals and the aims.
I agree with that too.
Okay, so what you guys are laying out is the possibility of him doing that as the ground forces go in. In other words, he can actually go to the American people and say, we did this for this reason. We hit them, and we hit them hard, and they will not bend. And not only won't they bend, but when we went back to them and said, hey, here's how we can end this war jointly. I'm willing to do X, Y, and Z if you're willing to do X, Y, and Z. And they would not do it. And this shows how they're a threat. And the effort to hit Diego Garcia 2,000 miles further than they said they had ever had a missile go shows that they're a threat, and that the development of mid-range missile, short and mid-range missile capacity once the war is over shows that they will have no compunction about using it and threatening everybody and blackmailing the Straits of Hormuz and blackmailing their neighbors and hitting Israel. And so we have to take the regime out. And we have to do this for the safety of the world. And so he is providing himself with a new phase in which he can say, we are going in and we are going to end this. And we're going to end it with this terrible regime gone. We're not going to replace it. That's not our job. But we're going to end this because we hit him. We said, come to the table. I don't know what else, what more we can do, because they can't be left in a position to threaten the Strait of Hormuz or their neighbors or whatever in a year once we bug out or something like that. So do you think that that's something that he might do, or is the world of this, when people say you need to do a better job of explaining the war to people, I kind of think he thinks I do nothing but explain the war to people. Like, I don't know what people are even talking about. I'm talking all the time, which I've said on this podcast about him, and that he would take this idea, he would think, I don't need to do that. I don't have to make a big national speech to the public and try to rally support because, the Democrats will never support me and la la la.
Yeah, I think that's closer to the case, or that he'll remain cagey about his communications about the war because it serves the actual effort itself. Democrats aren't going to support it. Whoever isn't going to support it isn't going to support it. So why set him up? Why set himself up to make pronouncements that may come back to bite him? If the idea is he's going to go all the way, a victory will do him more good than anything he's going to say between now and that victory.
So would you consider that a missed opportunity, or he is who he is, so maybe this is just not in his wheelhouse to do well?
I completely sympathize with people who say that he's communicated poorly about the war, but I myself have strangely grown completely comfortable with it. I have to admit,
but you're not somebody on the fence. You're not somebody
Right.
on the fence, and you're not somebody who doesn't really follow what's going on and just hears, "Oh my God, everything's a mess there."
I don't think it. I just don't think a Trump speech at this point is going to get someone off the fence and on his side over this.
Including independents, like who are low information voters who don't pay that much attention. Would they even hear the speech?
Right. I
That'd
mean,
be more. Maybe they'd hear excerpts on TikTok or they'd see little bits of it. But Elliot, I mean, that's the problem.
whereas a victory will have people who were against it now. Polls will show them 6 months down the line saying that they were always for it.
Right.
I agree with Abe that the actions are more important than the words, and that the ultimate mover of polls is going to be the outcome. But they're not mutually exclusive. And it isn't really just one speech. People need to hear things many times to be moved on something. And so ideally, his communication on this would have started before the State of the Union, in the State of the Union, where he made, relatively minimal mention. But I'm also with Abe in that, like, the guy's doing the right thing, and so how nitpicky can we be? In an ideal world, it would be a little bit different. He'd be a more forceful communicator on this stuff more consistently. Instead, Hegseth has been really the main communicator on this war, and General Kane. But it is, it is what it is, and the most important thing is that he stays the course and sees it through, and that's ultimately going to move the polls.
Does this mean that we have moved definitively into a world in which persuasion is no longer a key element of political action? I know this is a very broad thing to say, but 20 years ago, President of the United States 40 years ago, certainly, but say even 20 years ago, President gave a speech from the Oval Office about a major event happening in the world, or Bush gave a speech from that square in New Orleans saying what America was going to do to help after Hurricane Katrina. And 60, 70 million people or more would watch it. If you put Trump on all networks and all cable channels at once, say on Sunday night, if something were to happen this weekend, making a speech, how many people would watch it? It's March Madness. Would they watch him, or would they watch the basketball game? I just don't know that we live in a world in which people are looking to be persuaded or looking to have their leaders explain to them what's going on so that they can be reassured. That's something Walter Russell Mead said yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, and that Jerry Baker, said in the Wall Street Journal. Like, he's not doing anything to bring the public along and to make sure that the public is supportive of this large national mission. But what if that is something that's a nostalgia for a world that no longer exists, in which that simply cannot happen, either because of who he is, what the atomization of the media has done, all of that?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think people are also, they're just dug in. I mean, it's like persuadability is a sign of weakness, or, falsely, it's considered like, you're a dupe if you can be persuaded, like you got to dig in all the way. Yeah, we see it in its most distilled form among lawmakers who have sort of ceased, for the most part, trying to come to agreement on, trying to meet anywhere in the middle on a given issue.
But Eliana, we're talking here, again, what Abe mentions is true, like we're dug in. But presumably, there's a huge number of people in America who are not dug in. Because like that video that went around yesterday that everybody saw.
That's where I am. I think there's a huge number of people who are not dug in, and we saw it during presidential elections, where huge numbers of voters are switching between parties People are persuaded by messaging, and particularly on an issue that is this important, to say that the White House or the president shouldn't make an effort when he believes that American national security is at stake. That's why he's doing it, and I do believe he really believes it. I think is not right. But we saw in the 2024 election just a single ad, which is "She's for they them, he's for you," moved voters. And so, it's not true. And there's a huge number of voters, and they decide elections, who are moving between parties. You could say that's not because of political messaging, it's because of facts on the ground and stuff. But I think part of it is because of messaging. People are listening to what's going on around them, and they're responsive to it. And so I do think that we should be hearing more of a case, and it's worth an effort. But again, I'm grateful to the president for doing this, and so I'm just, I'm not going to beat him up that much for
I'm
not
not
doing
looking to
it.
beat him up. I'm really not. And if we were, it would make no difference.
But I do think people are open to being
Right.
persuaded on it, and particularly if a case was made day in, day out, I think it would move people.
I mean, I think the problem with his messaging, and as I've said before, he has talked more about this war as the war was going on than any president in the midst of a conflict has spoken about the conflict as it has gone on. If you think about, I mean, again, now I'm going back again 60 years, but if you think about Johnson or you think about Nixon during the Vietnam War, they opened their mouths about what was going on very seldom. They would give update speeches. It was their spokesman, or the briefings in Saigon or whatever. They were not the communicator. That wasn't what they were supposed to do. So, Trump talks about this every single day. I think the problem is that the message is self-contradictory. He said from day one, we've already won this war, but we're still fighting it. So how can we already have won it? That is a conundrum that basically cannot be resolved. He decided that this was going to be his line. He doesn't want to change his line, which, okay. But telling people who don't know what's going on that, we need to keep fighting this war that we've already won is a Schrodinger's cat. How if the war is still going, we've won the war and we haven't won the war at the same time in the same reality. And I don't think that's a resolvable problem for the people who need to be persuaded, who maybe hear him say both on the same day. So unless he hones his line or says, we're making this final push to end this and make America and the world safer and stronger and better and get the nuclear stuff out of the hands of the world's worst actors and all of that, but not say we've already won, maybe that would be better. I don't know.
Right. I think that. Sorry, go ahead, Ivan.
I was just going to say he's already kind of tried that. I mean, at one point he did say he will only accept unconditional surrender,
Right.
That
but even that's confusing because according to him, we already won. So what does it matter what they say?
Well, but then he confused it too. I mean, then he said, I'll know what that is when I see it,
Yeah.
So
like pornography. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like Potter Stewart's definition of pornography. I know it when I see it, but I can't define it. So, but Eliana, you were going to say.
I agree with you, John, and I think it would be useful for him to say, we've inflicted an enormous amount of damage, both on their ability to project and project force and threaten the region, as our ally has inflicted a tremendous amount of damage on their apparatus of internal repression. But we cannot back away while they hold, a gun to the world's head, and to the world economy, picking and choosing who transits the Strait of Hormuz and not allowing American or British or whoever's tankers to transit the strait. That is an unacceptable condition, and we will not allow it. And I think people would support that. We're not going to allow terrorist thugs to control this waterway, period.
Right. Yeah. So, but in the end, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If we win this war the way I think we will, I mean, I certainly hope so, because I think the consequences now of an inconclusive ending would be catastrophic for him, for the Republican Party, for the United States' national security interests, for the understanding of what it means to project power, and for regional stability in the Middle East. So I think the cost of a kind of unilateral declaration that hostilities are over and that we won something that we clearly haven't won would be wildly unacceptable, and that I suspect he knows that, but I also know that he does have an ability to create a reality distortion field for himself, in which he'll say I won without winning, sort of like 2020. Sort of ultimately the big question about 2020 is, does he really believe he won the election in 2020, or was this just his play that then became something that he could never move off of, because that would be too damaging politically for him, and in the long term it did not harm him and probably did help him marginally cohere the Republican Party a second time or a third time around him. But so I think it is possible he can talk himself into the idea that the Iranians have capitulated to him when they haven't. And Iran does have a history of being able to convince people of things that they have no reason, that the people have no reason to believe. They do seem to have that power sometimes.
I think that the biggest catastrophe about ending this inconclusively would be that while we will have destroyed so many of Iran's military capabilities, decimated the regime, all the obvious successes we've had, they would in years rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. And the thing is, after witnessing how the country has responded to this, we will never come this close again to seeing it through. If we don't see it through this time, that's it.
I mean, absolutely. First of all, it would not be for us to do the lawn mowing, right? I mean, and that's what the Israelis called mowing the lawn with Hamas and Gaza, which of course ended up being a disastrous effort, given what happened on October 7th. But if somebody is going to need to patrol and make sure that Iran, after the war, after surrender, whatever, isn't reconstituting itself, it will be the Israelis, or some kind of weird, never before seen joint Israeli-Saudi. I mean, who knows? We're not going to do that. That's clearly not going to be our role. We will have expended our blood and treasure on this mission. So he might as well finish it, and finish it good, because that's the only way out for him here, is to have a real victory, not an illusory victory. That long term, the world will say America took out, and I think the victory really is the collapse of the regime. It doesn't have to happen as a result of the conclusion of the war. It means that the regime, we get the nuclear materials, the straits are opened, and the regime is completely disempowered. And then what happens inside Iran happens after the bombs ceased falling. I mean, the Israelis and Admiral Cooper both said in the last week, it's not time yet for people to come out. It's like not safe. Like we're still picking targets and hitting important facilities and things like that. So the demand that the regime fall to a popular revolution in the middle of a actual ongoing bombing campaign, that's disingenuous nonsense being peddled by people who want to say that the war is a bad idea to begin with.
Right.
So
Cooper's interview with Iran International was quite interesting. He's really
he is, by the
capable.
way, he is the Schwarzkopf of this war. He is the commanding general of CENTCOM, the leader of CENTCOM, and the commander of this war, Admiral Cooper.
He's a really capable spokesman, and he noted that Iran, like Hamas, is firing missiles and drones from inside populated areas within the country, and also just as they're targeting civilians outside the region. And as a result, it is not safe for civilians to come out at many, many times, just as you're saying, John. So it's not crazy that civilians aren't coming out to try and overthrow people, because we and Israel need to target the places from which they're firing these missiles and drones in these civilian areas. And he specifically made that point in this interview.
I want to move on to one of my favorite segment things, which is to have Eliana highlight one of the fantastic pieces of reporting in the Free Beacon that we should highlight so you can know about them, because they're so crazy and the world needs to know about them, is Aaron Sibarium's latest magnum opus about UCLA, and a professor, an activist in residence at UCLA. Eliana, you didn't know I was going to ask you to do this, so I'm
happy to talk about it.
Okay.
So this actually follows on a larger story that we did probably a year ago or 18 months ago about UCLA medical school conducting a mandatory lecture for first-year medical students by an activist in residence, actually a position at UCLA, during which the UCLA's activist in residence demanded that the students who were there, they had to attend, pray to, quote, Mama Earth, and chant Free, Free Palestine, and a host of other absurdities, including medically, the curriculum for this mandatory course that extended beyond this lecture contained a host of medically questionable advice, including about fat phobia and all of this other stuff. So as a result of this story, the Goldwater Institute, conservative nonprofit out of Arizona, filed an open records request demanding all records related to UCLA's activist in residence program, and the use of the terms Israel, Zionist, Palestine, etc. UCLA, they've now filed a lawsuit over it because UCLA is stonewalling this records request, and that is what this story is about. UCLA Medical School, by the way, is also facing a lawsuit as a result of our reporting over its admissions. California, before the Supreme Court outlawed affirmative action, California as a state outlawed affirmative action, but our reporting showed that UCLA Medical School was ignoring these laws, using racial preferences in admissions, and they are now facing law school over that. The class, by the way, in which the activist in residence gave this lecture is titled Structural Racism and Health Equity. And readings for the course included an essay by a fat liberationist who claims that obesity is a slur, quote, used to exact violence on fat people. So to give you a taste of what medical school students are learning at one of the country's top medical schools. That bears David Geffen's name, by the way.
I think it's very important that people go to the Free Beacon itself, freebeacon.com, just to look at a photograph
Of the
Linda
woman.
Gray
This is
Garcia.
this is who
I
the
can't
Bulwark thinks
describe it.
Democrats should not
Yeah,
run for office, by the way, is someone who looks like
right.
this woman.
Yeah, I mean, you got to see what she's wearing. I won't even describe it. She looks like she's a 13-year-old on a 1980s PBS show doing a rap like Fresh Prince in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And that alone is worth the price of admission. It's a great story. Go to the Free Beacon and read it. Okay. Exciting new thing. We're going to do a
Wait,
commentary.
John, can I just say one other thing?
Please.
I
Yeah.
thought you were going to ask me about another one of our stories today, which is
Okay.
about the left-wing Senate candidate in Michigan Senate race,
Oh, yes. Yes.
based on Abdul El Sayed, who looks normal, but he's on the stump bragging. I won't get into the details of it. Folks can read it, but he's on the stump talking to United Auto Workers, bragging about an incident in which he set up a table and chairs in the middle of a lane of traffic. So this is what is appealing to voters in a Democratic primary.
Yeah. Free him.
Exactly.
Free him. Free him. Yes. That's a great story too. Okay. We're going to do a commentary recommends, and to help me with the commentary recommends, I am now introducing our producer, the producer of the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast, Commentary's new chief technical officer, technology officer, I should say, Noam Bloom, whom you've heard on the podcast before. Hi, Noam.
Hi, John. It's good to be here again.
So, Noam and I want to talk to you people about a movie that you have to go see. And that movie is Project Hail Mary, which opened on Friday, starring Ryan Gosling. I didn't know that starring Ryan Gosling was a tongue twister, but apparently it is. Noam, an enthusiast of science fiction. I'm less of an enthusiast about science fiction, but I am an enthusiast about good, involving, emotionally resonant, powerful, original, and really triumphantly successful movies, all of which I think Project Hail Mary, those adjectives apply to Project Hail Mary. So, Noam, Project Hail Mary is based on a novel by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, which was also made into a pretty fun movie 10 years ago with Matt Damon about a guy stranded on Mars and how the world rallies to help figure out how to bring him home. This is a much more elaborate, much more... the stakes of this are literally the entire universe, basically.
Yeah, it's also a more science fiction-y, a little more out there than The Martian was.
Right.
And yeah, I
The Martian
remember
really is about saving an astronaut stranded in space. This is about saving not only the Earth, but most of the star systems in the universe from a virus, essentially.
a star-eating virus. Yes. Yeah. I mean, so I read this novel in 2021. And I think in the space of one or two chapters, I already knew that this was going to be a movie and that it was going to be successful. It's a movie that anybody can enjoy, but unlike some other projects that you see now that are described as having mass appeal, this isn't a project that was set out to have mass appeal. I don't think that Andy Weir sat down and said, I'm going to write a book that anybody can enjoy. It's just that it is a story that anyone can enjoy. And there's a term that people are now using for this and some other movies. Hope core is the term that is emerging for this. The Martian, also Interstellar, is called a hope core movie. And despite the fact that the subject matter of this story is kind of bleak, like you said, the end of not just Earth, but many other star systems, it is a very hopeful and optimistic movie. And I think the main takeaways from it are positive: friendship, altruism, bravery, and I think that's why it's a movie that, you know, a 12-year-old and an 80-year-old could sort of equally enjoy.
Right. So very quickly, not to like spoil anything, but it's a movie that begins with a man played by Ryan Gosling waking up on a spacecraft having no idea who he is or how he got there or what is going on or what to do, and also discovering that the other people on the spacecraft are dead. And the movie, throughout the 2.5 hours, you discover the backstory that got him to where he is, and you see how he progresses on the spacecraft into fulfilling the mission that he ended up in space to perform, which is figuring out why this one star system isn't suffering from the disease that our sun and others are, where basically the sun is being blotted out, and that in 30 years on Earth, the world will basically end because the sun will be compromised and we will go through a giant ice age. So it's 30 years, the world comes together to try to figure out how to do it. And he then is on the spacecraft, and then it turns out in the triumph of the movie that somebody else has been sent from somewhere else to do exactly the same thing. And that this very alienated, lonely, quite sad guy on Earth who has no friends and no family and everything like that unexpectedly finds himself in space having to work with somebody else in space who also needs to work with him so that they can solve this problem together. I don't want to talk about somebody else.
The promotion,
the
the promotional material for the movie, I think, is a little more explicit. The book keeps a lot of this stuff secret. And it's also, I think it's also technically a wonderful movie. Greg Fraser, the director of photography, potentially the best DP working in Hollywood right now. They said they didn't use any green screen. It has a lot of very impressive sets, and it's just a joy. It's what movies are supposed to be. Right? It looks great. It makes you feel good, it is a very strong recommendation.
Yeah, and Ryan Gosling does something that very few people have been able to pull off in the course of cinematic history. A little like Tom Hanks in Castaway, or there's a movie with Robert Redford called All Is Lost. I mean, he is, until the arrival of somebody else, he is, and little flashbacks, he is all you see.
I mean, Tom Hanks is also alone until the volleyball shows up.
Right, exactly. But so this movie depends on your being able to tolerate being in the constant company of a single actor who has to convey all these emotions, not turn you off, not annoy you, amuse you, make you root for him, put him on your side. It is a quietly triumphant performance. This is really hard to do what Gosling does here, and it sort of launches him into another level of sort of stardom, I think, because this is it's kind of a performance for the ages. It's like something that people are going to watch on whatever TNT is in the future. Every kid is going to watch it. Every person, and 30 years from now, it's going to be one of those performances like, I don't know, Indiana Jones or Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz or something like that people will remember. So that's Project Hail Mary. Everyone's going to see it, so you should go see it too, even if you say you don't like science fiction, even if you don't like Ryan Gosling, and even if you think that you don't like, and most importantly, just for our audience, there's nothing liberal about it. Nothing conservative about it either, particularly, unless you believe that, fixing problems is inherently conservative. But it is a politics-free zone. And that itself is, of course, an enormous blessing, I would say. So Noam, thanks for popping on, and thanks for your help. Your new help. You've made our lives immensely easier as our new producer.
My pleasure. Noah Rothman was on recently and got a lot of props for establishing this podcast. But there was another person behind the scenes when the Commentary podcast launched, which was me, helping you guys buy things, teaching Noah how to edit the podcast on Audacity, so it feels a little bit like coming full circle to be here now.
There you go. That is absolutely true. Okay, well, we will be back tomorrow. So for Eliana and Abe, I'm John Pugwartz. Keep the candle burning.